Greetings, everyone. This is Professor Theo chiming in from Denver, Colorado. I want to shoot this brief video breaking down further some of the things we covered thus far, specifically in regards to meta theory and those three components of theory, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So, this is just to clarify some things. So, hopefully, you're taking advantage of checking out this video. So once again, when we think about meta theory, we have all these theories out there, theories that talk about a lot of stuff, theories that talk about relationships, theories that talk about communication, theories that talk about different behaviors, all these theories. And basically what a theory does is theories help explain and interpret. That's the basic way. Theories help us explain and interpret. So we experience any phenomenon, and the phenomenon is just the thing that we experience. And then when we try to make sense of it, what theory does is help us interpret and help us to explain what just happened. Well, what happens when you have theories that talk about theory? So there's theories that actually help explain theories. And those theories are called meta theories. And so we broke down that if you're thinking about communication, when you're communicating about relationships, that's just simply called communication. When you're communicating about school, that's simply called communication. But if you're communicating about communicating, so anytime I travel around and I do a workshop on communication, and I do a workshop on conflict resolution, which is a part of communication, or I do a workshop on how to prepare for a speech. Anytime I do a seminar about communication, or if I'm on a panel about communication, or me and my colleagues, or you and I as students, if we're sitting around after school talking about communication, that would be communicating about communication. That would be known as meta communication. All right, so meta theory is theories about theories. Now, when it talks about meta theory, there are three components. That first one we talked about is ontology. And ontology is what is the nature of reality? How do we know what's real? And so you see this oftentimes in movies. Two people are sitting on the roof and they're looking up at the sky and they see the stars and they be like, have you ever wondered what's out there? Have you ever wondered what's the main purpose of life? What is real? How do we know what is real? And then you see movies like The Matrix when they're in these pods and reality isn't reality. Reality is what they perceive. Because in reality, they were in these pods tapped into this virtual world. And they were being fed all this information as if they were real. And if the world around them was real. And I remember someone says, well, once he got disconnected and he was back in the virtual world, he went back into the virtual world temporarily and he was eating his steak. And he was like, I know this steak isn't real. I know it's just these electrodes, these electronic signals being sent to my brain saying that this steak is real. But he was like, man, it tastes so real. Hey, it's real to me. And so for him, he didn't care about what was truly real and what was not real. He only cared about what was real to him. And there's all these types of movies like that where in order to pacify people, you put them in these dream states. And we keep them under. And as long as they think that that's real, then it's real to them. And so there's different ways in which we look at reality. So imagine if there are three individuals sitting around having a conversation about a particular thing. And they start talking about, hey, what's real? What's real to you? Well, say if one of those individuals says, well, I believe that anything is real that has been established as being real. If there's people who know a lot more than I do, who have studied this thing out and they say that this thing is real, and then there's scientific proof to back up that those things are real, then they're real to me. So although I can't see the air, I can breathe it. It's real to me because science says so, and I'll go with it. Uh, there's some things that I have not experienced. There's some places I haven't gone, but they're on the map, and I have friends who've gone those places. That's real enough for me. And if I get enough money and if I get some time, I'm pretty sure if I hop on a plane, go there, that place is going to be there. Because there are certain things that we believe are real apart from our personal experience with those things. So we take emotion out, we take personal experience out of the equation, we take all those things out of the equation, and we say these things are real, not because I say they're real, but because the masses, society as a whole, backed by factual evidence, have established these things to be real. This camera phone I'm using is real. I can touch it, but even before I got the iPhone 8, I knew it was real because I saw commercials was on sale. I saw other students having it, and so my personal need to have a particular thing, my personal belief in a particular thing, does not make that thing real. That thing is real apart from me. If I believe that to be true, that would be a realist perspective. And the easiest way to remember it is realist. The key word is real. It is real. Apart from what I believe, that thing is real. But then someone says, hey, I understand exactly what you're saying, but for me, if I haven't personally tasted it, if I haven't personally touched it, if I haven't personally experienced it, if I've never traveled to that place, then it's not real to me. And the key with this is when that person says it's not real to me, it's not necessarily saying that that thing does not exist. It just may mean that that thing isn't meaningful to them. So think about if you are someone who's never lost a family member to cancer, that concept may not be real to you. Um, it doesn't mean that you don't think that it doesn't happen. It's just not real to you. Um, and so even when someone says a certain thing isn't real to them, we can't always take it at face value. Because they may be simply talking about real as in meaningful. But maybe they are literally saying there are certain things that since they haven't experienced, they don't believe in it. Someone who doesn't believe in God could be saying, I don't believe in them because I have not personally experienced them. Or they could be saying, I don't believe him because I don't think he is real at all. And may not even be open to the experience. And so, but that would be a anomalous perspective. It's the notion, it's the philosophy that how can you truly know something is real if you yourself haven't experienced it? And the beauty with that is there are certain things that I haven't experienced that I would say hasn't become real yet that I'm looking forward to experiencing. There are certain places, certain joys that come with traveling to certain places. Say if someone says, if you ever go to this place, it's going to be a joyous time. And maybe I look forward to experiencing that. But no matter how many times I've seen a video on that place, no matter how many testimonies I've heard from people who have gone there, that thing, I won't be to truly appreciate that experience until I've experienced it myself. And all of a sudden now, when I see the commercial, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about because I know that thing to be true. I've experienced it also. But that anomalous perspective simply says you can't truly know a thing and believe a thing to be real unless you've experienced it. And then that final one that goes underneath ontology is the social constructionist perspective. This is the one that talks about how you get with other people, whether it's one other person, whether it's a group, whether it's us as a whole society, and we determine our reality. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that we get to pick and choose whether gravity is real or gravity is not. that we pick and choose whether oxygen is real and oxygen is not, those things we can still say are real. What it's talking about is relationally, maybe there's some things that are contextualized to our relationship. For example, we can talk about this concept of love, which is an abstract construct. And there's no universal way to define love because love is defined differently by different people. And it's normally defined differently by different people within the context of relationships. And so anytime I talk about I love someone, or even if I love a thing, if I love a particular, I love watching TV, it's still speaking about my relationship in regards to television. It doesn't have to be in regards to animate objects. It can be inanimate objects. But it's you and someone else. Whenever you're talking about love, you're talking about the relationship that I have with this thing or with this person. And you're saying that when I say I love this thing, and I hear you say you love that thing also, I can assume that the love is the same way. It's contextualized. So there's times when I may say I love my wife, and then there may be some people I hear say also that they love their wife. And I can't just automatically say, hey, great, it's the same. We both love our wives. No, because love is not a universal word. It's not a universal thing. It doesn't say that love is always defined and what love always looks like the same thing in each context. No, love is something that is contextualized. It is something that is socially constructed by the individuals in that relationship. So my love for my wife is contextualized to her and I. We determine what that love looks like. And we begin to put bullet points underneath that love. So, for example, if I say I love my wife and if my wife says she loves me, if we were to write that on a piece of paper, I love my wife, we both believe that love is an action verb. So underneath that line that says I love my wife, there would be some bullet points that flesh out what that love looks like. Here are some things I do specifically because I love my wife. Here's some things I don't do because I love my wife. And we flesh those things out. Now, someone else may say, I love my wife. And they write that down on a piece of paper, and then they put their bullet points underneath of what that looks like, and it may not look exactly the way that mine looks like. And that's because love, peace, trust, all those things are socially constructed. They are, through relationship, made real. And the reality of those things in one relationship may not totally reflect the reality of those things in another relationship. For example, I love my congregation. I love my students. I love my wife. And underneath the bullet points of those different statements, they would be different. Because the way I love my wife is different than the way I love my students and the way I love my congregants. So you can't just go by the fact that I said I love those three different groups because it's socially constructed. It's contextualized to those relationships, and it's going to look differently. So in that regards, what is real isn't universally defined. What's real is defined by the individuals who say that thing is real. And then another group of individuals may define it differently, and that's all right because it's real to them. And so that would be the socially constructivist perspective. And now I think it's important that I point out that you can hold all three perspectives in life at various different times or all at the same times. There may be some things that you would say today are real. No matter what you think about them, you're smart enough to say that those things are real. Whether it's this table that I'm hitting on right now, the chair I'm sitting in, we can all establish that those things are real. Yet there may be some things you may say, well, it's just not real to me. It doesn't mean it's not meaningful to me. It hasn't hit home for me. There's certain things that simply aren't real. And like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't exist. They're not my reality. I think about whenever I talk about race, issues of race, and we talk about the necessity of hearing different people's stories, allowing people to tell their stories, listening to their stories. One thing that may come up, one of the reasons why there's such a breakdown, one of the reasons why there's such pushback when it comes to issues of race is because some people may tell a story. They may talk about certain experiences, and the person that they're talking to who happens to be of a different race could legitimately say that that's not my reality. Or the person who is pouring out their heart may say, but you don't understand my reality. They're simply saying that there are things that are real to me that aren't real to you. And we're not talking about this table is real to me, but it's not real to you. Maybe we're talking about my experiences are real to me, but not real to you. The pain I feel is real to me, but not real to you. That would fall underneath this nominalist perspective. That person who is crying out saying, you don't understand what I'm going through, and you'll never understand it until you can go through it also. And it may be situations where we can't go through those same things. There are certain people who don't know what it's like to be a man if you're not a man. You don't know what it's like to be black if you're not black. And from a nominalist perspective, what I would be telling those individuals is you'll never know my experiences, the reality of what I go through. You can only know them to a certain extent, but you'll never fully know them because they're not real to you because you haven't experienced them. And so that's that nominalist perspective. And then in that same relationship, that person who may not get it, as I'm breaking down these things, we may collectively begin to figure out some things together. And all of a sudden now, we socially create our own reality in regards to our relationship. And it doesn't mean that our reality supersedes the reality of the world. It doesn't mean that once something becomes real to us, or if something's not real to us, it doesn't mean that that thing isn't real in the world. There could be things that are real in the world, but may not be real to us, relevant to us. Or there may be a way of doing things in the world. And we may say, well, we don't adopt that way of doing things. We're going to do things differently. And all of a sudden, here's our new reality. All those things can happen all at once. So don't think that if you're thinking about ontology, it has to be either you always ascribe to this realist perspective, or you always ascribe to this social constructivist or this nominalist perspective. No, sometimes you go back and forth, and sometimes you may hold one in regards to a particular subject, but you may hold a different perspective in regard to some other stuff, and you may hold this perspective in regard to these things. And it's all good, all right? And then we talked about epistemology. And this is the nature of knowledge. What do we know? What can be known? How do we come to know these things? And there's two main positions, objectivism and then subjectivism, or objectivist and subjectivist. Just think of those root words, objective. Objective normally means without me being emotional, without me being biased, without me going in with a certain preconceived notions. I'm just going to look for the facts. The good thing about, say, like a true and false question on an exam, they're supposed to be objective. You either get it right or you don't. Now, when you get to the short answers and the paragraph type short answers and the paragraph type answers, all of a sudden now those can be subjective. Now the professor can say, well, I can kind of see where they're going with this and things of that nature. It's not as cut and dry. This objectivist view says that there's a world out there. We can discover that world. We can discover that reality. We can discover that knowledge. And we should strive to do so from an unbiased perspective. Don't go looking just for the stuff that's going to affirm the things you already believe. Don't ignore things just because it conflicts with what you already know. Be open to knowledge, even if that knowledge conflicts or contradicts with what you already know. You just go in and say, well, what is? What can I find out? and be open to whatever you find out. And it also suggests that knowledge is, in a lot of ways, universal, as in, when I go looking for certain answers or certain questions, I'm going to find those answers. And if you went looking for answers to those same questions, you're going to find the same answers because those answers are objective. So if we were to ask the question, what happens if you jump off of a 10-foot platform? Far as, and the three options are, do you float in the air, do you fly, or do you fall to the ground? Regardless of what I expect going into, I'm going to find out that I fall to the ground based upon gravity, a real thing called gravity. It's objective. My emotions, my bias, my stereotypes, my preconceived notions doesn't dictate the fact that I'm going to fall. If you were to ask that same question and you're given those three options, when you jump off the 10-foot platform, you're going to fall too. And then the next 1,000 people, if you don't have any parachutes, or assuming you don't have any hang glider or anything like that, if you're all things remaining the same, we're all going to come up with the same conclusion that when we step off, we fall. That's an objective knowledge. We're all going to come to learn the same thing objectively, regardless of what we felt going in, regardless of how we feel about it afterwards. We're going to objectively, without bias, learn the same thing. Yet, a subjective perspective or position would say, knowledge isn't universal. It's not a clear-cut, here is the thing, but knowledge is our perceptions, our perspectives on a certain thing. And that, so in that regards, knowledge isn't exactly what can be known. It's knowledge is what you know about that thing, or your perspective on that thing, your interpretation of a thing. And whenever you start talking about interpretation, now interpretation is left up to the person who is gaining the knowledge. Where certain things, certain realities we assume aren't open to interpretation. You step off and you fall. That's the reality. Now we can come to different conclusions about why we fell, things of that nature, maybe our interpretation in regards to that. But for the most part, you either have reality, that which is real, it's objective, no bias, but then you have knowledge over here that's based upon what do I think about that thing? What are my feelings towards a certain thing? How do I see that thing? And so I think about my wife and I, we may have a reality that we bought some food and days later we left the food in the refrigerator and we had to throw it out. It went bad. We wasted the food. From a objectivist standpoint, we can both agree that we bought some food and we threw that food out. That's pretty objective. What would be subjective is our perspective on whether that was a waste or not, or is it just something that just happened? So how do we interpret that thing? How do we feel about that thing? So you have what the thing is, apart from your interpretation, that's objectivist. And then you have, how do you see or interpret that thing? That is the subjectivist. And what I found in many relationships, oftentimes we can't even agree on the thing. We can't agree on what day we met, and I'm not talking about my wife and I, we're talking about just in general. We can't agree on how many times we should go to the movies. We can't agree on certain tangible things. But even if we can't agree on those tangible things, disagreement may still come up in regards to how we see those things. I think about, this will be the last example I'll give, think about money. Maybe I went out and bought some shoes and spent $80. There's a receipt. My wife and I, we can clearly agree that I spent $80. There's no dispute that. That's an objectivist view. Uh, $80. That's what was spent. The subjectivism would come in regards to how we both interpret that $80. She may say, hey, you work hard, you deserve it. $8, that's nothing. I may be like, man, I felt bad spending that $8. I'm kind of frugal. I don't like spending that type of money. I think I spent too much money, but you kind of, maybe she encouraged me to do it. I really need these shoes, so I did it. That's the subjectivism. That's saying that we both are looking at the same thing, but our interpretation of that thing is slightly different. Whereas that objectivist would say, what is the thing? All right? And then the last component we have is that axology. This is a study of values. Can we separate our values when it comes to doing research, when it comes to interpretation, when it comes to our experiences? Can we just say, well, here is what it is? Or do we allow our own background to come into play? When we make decisions, when we observe, are we just strictly trying to observe objectively? Or does it become subjective because we allow our emotions to get involved? We allow our past history to get involved. There are certain schools of study that says when you're doing research, just do the research, nothing but the facts. We don't care how you feel about it, just get the facts. But then there are certain schools of researchers that says, no, I'm a part of this research. And the people I'm researching, they're real people also. So I can't separate the emotion from it. I can't hear about the crimes and the hurts and the pains and then just become cold and say, well, I got to ignore all that and just do the work. No, that's part of the work, that humanity. And so it comes down to what type of research you're doing. It comes down to what type of researcher you want to be. In terms of, do you just want the numbers, the cold hard facts, which means you're probably going to lean more towards quantitative? Or do you want to know the stories behind the stories and get connected with the people, which means you're also going to get emotionally attached sometimes, and that's going to be more qualitative. All right, so this has been a 28-minute video. I didn't want to make it this long, but I also wanted to make sure I was breaking stuff down. So hopefully, if you got time, if you don't want to watch it all at once, break it up. Well, at this point, you've either watched it or you've already broken it up, or you didn't watch it. We're going to find out come Monday. All right, but I did want to record this because I know a couple of you said that you were still confused, and it'd be great if I broke some stuff down outside of the class, give you something to look back on. So hopefully you take advantage of this video. Look forward to seeing you all on Monday. Take care and God bless.